Hi friends, it's Brittany eating in Papyrus and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here with me today because this may be one of my favorite projects I've done in quite some time, and I suspect it will become one of your favorites too. Who here loves Tim Holtz ephemera packs? I know I do, but I could burn through like a whole pack in just an afternoon embellishing some of my projects. Not to mention these packs, when you're using them up like crazy, they can get a little bit pricey. So today I want to use some of Tim Holtz real ephemera packs to inspire us to recreate some of those pieces. Not all of them can be recreated, so to speak, but we're going to use these packs to inspire us to make some of our own vintage ephemera pieces that we can use to embellish our projects. And this is going to be so much fun. So let's take a look at some actual ephemera packs. This first pack I opened, the pieces were a bit small. I would definitely, of course, use these in my junk journals, but these pieces weren't necessarily my favorite in terms of ones that I would pick to recreate. That parcel thing though, that square or rectangle shaped piece with the blue lines rather, that would be really fun. The bingo card we could easily recreate. I'm just throwing some ideas out there. We could just write the words bingo up top and stamp some numbers all along the card. Some of these other pieces, like that bird's nest, absolutely gorgeous, but if we're going to recreate pictures, I would suggest just printing out a picture of a bird's nest and backing it with some chipboard. That is what makes these ephemera pieces so nice and versatile, is because they have some heft behind them. So if you do want to recreate some of these pieces that are mostly photographs, I would just suggest finding the image that you want to recreate and putting it in Word or somewhere where you can easily resize it, and just printing it, fussy cutting it, and simply pasting it to some chipboard. I'm not going to do that today because I want to actually create some of these pieces with you. You can easily resize some images and paste them to chipboard. Some of these pieces are as simple as dates. I think what creates the magic is just that printed sort of font, the classic typewriter font, which if you have a label maker, you could recreate as well. Some of those maps, again, you could just take a map and paste it to chipboard, cut it out, and distress it a little bit. I'm seeing some of those little charm kind of circle sort of type prints. You could easily recreate those just by using your circle punch to punch out some circles and either writing or printing on them and distressing them a little bit. So let's grab ourselves some heavy cardstock. I would probably start with white cardstock, and you'll probably want a paper cutter, and we'll kind of go from there. Now, to begin, I just start chopping up some strips of the heavier cardstock. I decided, after looking at those packs, one of the first things I would like to create are those rulers. We are going to, First of all, I think that they're pretty easy to recreate. There's so many different ways to customize them and make them your own. Some of them were thin, some of them were thicker, and there were some short ones and a long one. So I kind of just mimicked the approximate size of what I thought I would want my rulers to be. Now, the best way to distress these, I think, is with some watercolor paints. Though I did initially stick with some more neutral colors, I really started having fun with it and started bringing out some of the wilder colors, and that's okay. Those obviously look less like Tim Holtz ephemera pieces and more bright and happy, but that, we're recreating these to make them whatever you would like. So feel free, if you want to stick with some of the more vintagey neutral colors, feel free to do so. If you want to get a little bit crazy like I did, pull out the pinks, the purples, and the blues, that's totally fine too. I think I may have forgotten to mention, but you really want to start with wetting down your cardstock. This will help kind of give that nice loose watercolor look as opposed to having really harsh lines. You want these to be mixed media. You want it to look like there are splatters and spills. You don't want them to look too perfectionist, like you just painted some papers. I hope that makes sense. Also, aside from the watercolors, the other great thing to distress these pieces with, of course, is some instant coffee. If you have some instant coffee in a bottle, I would suggest grabbing that. Aside from the watercolors and that, I did end up using some Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks, which work absolutely lovely, and some white gesso. So it's all up to you, but just basically the things that you would use normally in your mixed media projects, that's what we're going to be using today. Anything that adds color and pigment is perfectly fine. You don't need a whole array of things. I will say in this video, I do a lot of stamping. And the reason for that is I felt like when I was creating these pieces, the best way to sort of make them look more realistic was finding words and numbers, kind of sentiments. I felt like that was the best way to create these pieces to make them sort of look like Tim Holtz ephemera. You don't need a huge variety of stamps, but if you can find some words, some numbers, some sentiments, the sort of vintage theme stamps that say like baggage claim, condemned, sort of, figures, as in like specimen cards or specimen numbers, labels, postage stamps are perfect. Any bugs, butterflies, things we can use to make our own kind of faux specimen cards, those are the stamps you want to pull out. Now, of course, you can use die cuts and a ton of other things. And in some regards, I'm a little disappointed in myself that I used so many stamps, because I wanted this to be more of a variety of projects. They just worked so well, and I felt like I could mass make so many pieces of ephemera at once. I think in an upcoming video, we're going to need to make more of these, and I will show you guys some other techniques for recreating these. But for this video, I really kept it mostly 2 stamps. So pull out your stamps. You'll see as we go through the video, you'll see kind of which kind of stamps you may want to use, and I do break those up by actually writing myself with some black calligraphy pens. I don't have the best handwriting, but if you look at the Tim Holtz ephemera pieces, a lot of them actually are copies of people's handwriting, and it gives it that nice sort of vintage old-timey look. So if you do have that, or a label maker, or some way to make it look like printed text, those will also carry you a long way through this project. On these faux rulers, I did grab an actual ruler just to help me kind of line the paper up and approximate where the hash marks would go. I added phone numbers. Obviously, the 1 doesn't represent an inch. It's all in good fun. And I added a couple of sentiments on each of these to kind of personalize them. The first one I put made in the USA. Some of them I made up my own brands, or on the bottom I added on some of them the unit that I was measuring in, quote unquote measuring in, and a lot of them I just stamped. You'll see the one where I pull out my Paris stamp on this really pretty pink splattered faux ruler. I stamped Paris, but I also had this like fancy stamp of what I thought a brand symbol may be, and so I stamped them a few different times in a repeating pattern across the ruler to make it look like that would maybe be the brand of the ruler. There are so many different ways you can customize these. Think of, instead of just plain hash marks, on one of them I added some triangles and some hearts. Well, I guess instead of numbers, I added hearts and triangles to kind of signify a unit of measurement. You could do some faux stitching. I think I did that on one of them. You can add some more personalized sentiments on each of them, put names, just like you would in elementary school. You would put your name on your ruler. You could even sew these. That might look really nice. Oh my gosh, there's so many things you can do with these silly faux rulers. This may be one of my favorite pieces of Tim Holtz ephemera that I made, and I have to say, these are one of these pieces, I actually liked mine better than the ones that I found in the pack. So I am really proud of myself for that. Next, we are making paint chips. You know them, you love them. I don't think that I pulled out the paint chip when we were initially looking through my Tim Holtz ephemera packs, but I have definitely seen them in there before, and I love paint chips, so why not? Now, his paint chips are a little bit different than the ones I'm making. Oftentimes, I see a lot more sort of notations next to them or pictures of different things. Like I'm vividly picturing one where it was swatched with a bunch of green and it had a green bird and some notations on it. If you really want to get that detailed, you can, and I think that would look amazing. I decided to keep these paint chips simple. I just cut out some white cardstock, swatched some colors. I did do some color mixing because I wasn't thrilled with the options I had on the specific palette I was using. Once my paint chips dried, I went ahead and just made up a color and wrote them over the chip. I do think these look better with words and numbers or images on them. They look more like the Tim Holtz ephemera pieces. And so I just made up what I felt like the color looked like. Like, I think on one of the pink ones, I put like peony and flamingo pink and rose or blush or something like that. And then I went ahead and did some stamping at the bottom. I think these look great with numbers. I did put a word on the first one. It had the word art with some text, some background text, which I thought looked really nice. If I were to do anything different, I definitely would have distressed these more. They still look too sort of white and crisp to me to be a Tim Holtz ephemera piece. That's just me. Just some background color would have looked really nice, or maybe some splatters. I was thinking some splatters of white gesso. Maybe inking around the chips would have looked really nice. Maybe some stitching, some sewing. I still may go back and do something to these, though I'm limited now that it has watercolor on it. I don't want the watercolor to bleed outside of the little rectangles that I've created, so I've kind of limited myself from that standpoint. So if you do want to distress these, I would recommend doing that first, letting them dry with whatever you distressed it with, and then swatching your colors. But overall, these I thought turned out really great. And paint chips look amazing in journal pockets. They can be used as journaling cards. You know, you can write on the back of them. You can put them in clusters, whatever little projects you want to create. So overall, I'm pleased with this. I just wish I would have distressed these a little bit more up front. And then again, I think they would have looked a little bit more like genuine Tim Holtz pieces. Okay, next on the docket are postage stamps. I'm sure you guys saw I pulled out tons from the Tim Holtz ephemera packs. I am calling these postage stamps, though I didn't go around them with my deckled scissors like I normally do for postage stamps, and I may even decide to use these in other ways, like page trim or maybe as seals on the back of an envelope or something like that. So I did not go around with deckled scissors, just to give myself the option to transform them into something else later. Now, off camera, I just cut out some little stamps, squares and rectangles from white cardstock, and wet them down and just dropped blobs of paint onto them. I turned them upside down a little bit, let them run, let them bleed. I didn't want like harsh lines or anything like that. I wanted more splotchiness, and I went with some very bright colors. You won't find these in a Tim Holtz ephemera pack. I totally get it. I understand. That's kind of just what I was going for. I did make some very neutral ones, though, in some oranges and browns and greens, but I'm starting out with these flamingo bright pink and purple squares. Seeing as these were bright pink, I opted to go with the botanical theme. I started with stamping some plants on them, though these stamps always look better if there are multiple images on them, I think. So I went ahead and grouped all of them together so that when I put down this large botanical stamp, they would all get a little bit of flower in the corner, and then I could put some other stamps on top of them. Again, I continued to go with the black ink just because I thought anything else was kind of gonna get drowned out by the pinks and the purples, and stamp some faux postage stamps over top. These always look so much better, and they have so much more depth and sort of dimension to them if you do some stamping off the actual stamps themselves, and that's exactly what I did. If you wanted to splash something or splatter something over top to make them even more lively, I would probably suggest some white gesso or something like that. I'm really pleased with how these turned out, and I use a similar process to go over the orange and green ones. Those I do end up muting them down a little bit with some white gesso. I just thought that the ink would show up better, and it just kind of cuts them a little bit, so to speak. They're just really bright and bold, and the white kind of plays into the neutral theme perfectly. They look a little bit more grunge that way, and I really love how these came out. In fact, if I were to do it over, I would probably do a similar process on the pink ones by adding a little white gesso, but nevertheless, I was thrilled with these. And like I said, it makes total sense to use these as postage stamps, go around the sides with some deckled edge scissors, though I probably will use them in other ways. I will probably use them as page trim. I will add them to some clusters, maybe use them as little seals on envelopes. Gosh, the possibilities are endless, but yeah, I will definitely use these as more than just postage stamps, though I am calling these my Tim Holtz faux postage stamps. Whenever I think of Tim Holtz, I definitely think of butterflies and bugs, and so as I was stamping those remaining bug faux stamps, I kept thinking back to that little butterfly. I guess you would call it a specimen card, maybe not so much, but that card with the different butterflies and little notations next to the type of butterflies, and thinking it would be really easy and nice to recreate some tags with some different botanicals and animals on them. So that's exactly what we are doing. I guess we will call this our specimen tags. So off camera, I just cut some white cardstock into some rectangular sort of tag shapes. I rounded the top corners and left the bottom corners, those square edges. And I went ahead and just let some watercolors. I wet the papers first, let some watercolor inks sort of just bleed into the background there. Some red, sort of rusty colors, brown. You don't want to cover your tags entirely. You definitely want to leave some white space with these. You can alternatively sort of do the same thing with some oxide or sprays. And maybe, I think what I did was actually, after I got the color on my tags, I took a clean paintbrush and let some water drip along the edges and kind of held them upside down to get that nice sort of spilled look to them. I think they really look best this way. Of course, you can recreate them however you want, but that's kind of how I got that kind of spilled look with some white space in the background, and I just repeated the process. I want to make several of these, so that is what we are going to do now. Even though I love this, and you could totally leave this as is, I wanted to stay true to the Tim Holtz pieces of ephemera that are pretty much all colored. And those butterflies look really vibrant, so I decided to try and put some color in the botanicals that I stamped on. This top one is a little bit tricky because there isn't a whole lot of room inside the black lines, so I knew I would definitely need to color in with some colored pencil. something fine tipped, and I love this. I end up these are my Aquarel watercolor pencils, which I just recently got, so I'm just kind of playing around with them and figuring out how they work. But I do end up going over the watercolor pencil with some water to kind of activate it, and it sort of almost looks like they were painted on. These are absolutely fabulous. These are becoming one like some of my must-have craft supplies. So I just do that for all the botanicals, add some water, and this tag really comes to life very quickly. I found these seed catalog stamps in my stash that had a variety of some text and numbers related to seed packets. I didn't want to overwhelm the image with a ton of stamping, so I just got a small stamp pad and just went over the part of the stamp that I actually wanted to use. You could do it this way or just cover your stamp and stamp off the side. But I think like a little pop of a number or some text to denote something about each of the flowers or whatever items you stamped or drew is perfect. I just don't want to overwhelm these. I wanted to keep the writing simple, just like you see on the Tim Holtz snippets. If you don't have any stamps like this, I think the actual, like some handwritten notations about, like for example, the types of flowers these are would be really, really nice and provide it with that sort of vintage, old-timey look. And actually now I'm kind of wondering, I feel like I should have done that. That's fine, I'll make some more. I did think that these stamps were perfect for this tag, but I wouldn't hesitate to either take a label maker and punch out, you could totally make up a name for these, or just handwrite like figure something or other, or such and such a branch, and make up the name of, I don't think those are real flowers, but you could totally make up the name of some and that would look really nice too. I also ended up adding some gold gilding wax to these. I mostly use the gilding wax to kind of go around the images and sort of highlight them and make them pop a little bit more. This really added a nice finishing touch. I have to say, of all of the projects I ended up doing, this is one of my favorite, and I think I may have to make some more tags like this in the future. I'm envisioning putting some of these in my nature journals, and once I punch holes through all of them and add a little bit of cording or something like that, these will truly be complete. Next are what I call T cards. These are business cards of the olden days where people would essentially write the name of their business, maybe a simple symbol representing their business, an address. Some would contain kind of a small advertisement. Some are really silly and even listed references, which I thought was really funny. Some would have postage stamps or something in the backgrounds, but you get the drift. So I decided to create some of my own T cards. I started by cutting some rather large pieces of cardstock and distressing them with some watercolor. Again, most of them I left plenty of white space. I splattered some paint, distressed it with some rustic kind of colors, some blues, some oranges, reds, browns, you get the gist. I actually found a set of stamps with watches on them and some kind of advertisement material for them and some little sentiments about these watches, so I decided to do a watch company themed T card first. After that, I added some numbers and some stars to kind of make this look a little bit more like an advertisement. Even if you don't have a full set of stamps related to one topic, you can totally use the stamps you have, whether they be ticket stubs or numbers or stars or symbols, to sort of conjure up an advertisement of your own. I promise. Just add some numbers, some words. You can, if you don't have the numbers or words that you think would fit, just handwrite some stuff. As you see on these Tim Holtz snippets, plenty of them also have copies of old handwritten words. Some of them are like not even legible. You can just kind of fake writing if you want, but I promise it'll all come together kind of and sort of look like an advertisement from the olden days. I also found some other advertisement type stamp for corsets and either iron or bed frames. I can't remember at this point, but I decided to kind of start there, and the rest actually flowed pretty easy. I also found that stamp that said factory number, and since we were talking about producing something, i.e. corsets, I thought that was a perfect fit. I wasn't so sure at first, but when all was said and done, I loved the look of the stamping with the handwritten text. Next are parcel cards, the ones that say parcel post or something to that effect, and the from and the to with some lines. I love these, and these will be so easy to recreate. Now you're going to want to make some cardstock pieces that are more rectangular, probably more rectangular than the ones I made. These are definitely squares. That is okay. They work too. All I did was take a ruler just so that I could have my acrylic marker line be perfect, and put my ruler just a little bit a little ways from the edge, and then made a line with my marker. You don't necessarily have to use the ruler. I just am not good at making straight lines, so that's why I decided to use it. You're going to want to be careful if you're using, so these are acrylic paint pens. They take a while to dry, and when I was finagling with my ruler, the paint pen bled a little bit. You just want to keep that in mind. Give it a second to dry if you're using paint pens like me. I was very impatient. Anyways, once you create your border, all we're going to do is draw a line horizontally to separate the from and the to, do a little bit of stamping up top. Any sort of sentiment that basically says that this is a parcel card. And in terms of embellishments, these are about as easy as they come. Guys, I adore these. I could make a whole slew of these. You could put some postage stamps on them. I have to say, I do love the different color of stamping, the one that has the letter parcel in red. I think that adds a really, really nice touch. It looks a little bit more genuine to me. But really, the sky's the limit. You don't have to use stamping at all. You can hand draw these. I don't know. I adore these, and again, it doesn't get much easier than this. Okay guys, so we are in the home stretch, and this next set of ephemera was inspired by that blue baggage claim tag you saw in the very beginning of the video. For the sake of these tags, I made a couple of different sizes. I simply cut out some white cardstock and just snipped off the top to create the tag look. If you want to be more precise, get some pre-cut tags, or maybe get some die cuts out, but just snipping up at the top with your scissors gives it that nice tag look, and it worked perfectly for this project. Just like the claim check tag, I wanted to make a tag where it would have like a perforation at the base, so you would hang on to one part and you would give somebody the other part to hang on to. If you had a die cut, you could actually do this really well, or if you had a small hole punch, maybe you could recreate that perforated edge. For our sake, I just went ahead with my calligraphy pen and made some dashes to kind of make it look like some faux stitching. It totally looks fake, but I'm okay with that. To make it look more like a tag that you may tear off at the bottom, I put a number at the base and then wrote the same exact number along the side. And I always think it looks a little bit more convincing if you have a slightly different base than the version up top. So I just stamped two different words there, one at the bottom, one at the top, one to show it was reserved, and then put ticket on the base just to show it would be like a ticket stub, and then added a couple other things just to kind of customize it, cute-tin it up, I guess you'd say. And yeah, I really like how these came out. I do wish I would have grunged them up a little bit more prior to decorating them, but that's okay. I still really like these, and I know for next time. And now for our final project, tickets. Tickets come in every Tim Holtz ephemera pack, so it only feels appropriate that we would make some of our own. Start by cutting some cardstock lengthwise, just create some nice long strips, and then you're going to want to grab a ruler and some kind of craft mat with some markings on them. All I do is count the number of squares. I line my cardstock up and then basically line the ruler up with the markings on the craft mat to make sure I'm drawing straight lines, and usually make a line after about 3 or 4 boxes. That's the size of the ticket. Once I make lines all to the end, I go ahead and cut right where those lines are, and that basically will get you a bunch of tickets before you know it. I grabbed my crocodile and just took the larger hole punching settings and basically took a bite out of each of the corners, and there you have a ticket. After I had the tickets shaped the way I wanted, I inked them up a little bit, grunged them up, did some stamping and mark making, and though this is the easiest project we did today, these did not disappoint in the least. They looked very Tim Holtzy, very vintage, very grunge, and they're going to look perfect as sort of collage fodder in clusters or as page decorations. There are a million things that you can do with these little guys. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this process as much as I did, though these don't look exactly like the Tim Holtz ephemera bits, and I knew they wouldn't. They really have surpassed my expectations for what I thought that I could make with just some very basic supplies. My only regret is that I had about a million more things that I wanted to make, and for purposes of keeping this video a reasonable time, I just didn't get to doing it. If you really enjoyed this though, and you would like to see me recreate more of the Tim Holtz ephemera pieces, please drop me a comment below. I'm sure you guys have other ephemera packs that I don't have, so if there are other pieces of ephemera you would really like to see me recreate, please drop me a comment below. I do read all of your comments, and I really, really very much appreciate the feedback. Hearing what you guys enjoy making and what styles you like allows me to create more content for you that you hopefully enjoy. So if you really like this and you want to see more of Ink and Papyrus, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you the next time.